Mr. Tickle by Roger Hargreaves. It was a warm, sunny morning. In his small house at the other side of the wood, Mr. Tickle was asleep. You didn't know that there was such a thing as a tickle, did you? Well, there is. Tickles are small and round, and they have arms that stretch and stretch and stretch. Extraordinary long arms. Mr. Tickle was fast asleep. He was having a dream. It must have been a very funny dream, because it made him laugh out loud, and that woke him up. He sat up in bed, stretched his extraordinary long arms, and yawned an enormous yawn. Mr. Tickle felt hungry, so do you know what he did? He reached out one of his extraordinary long arms, opened the bedroom door, reached down the stairs, opened the kitchen door, reached into the kitchen cupboard, opened the biscuit tin, took out a biscuit, brought it back upstairs, in through the bedroom door and back to Mr. Tickle in bed. As you can see, it's very useful indeed, having arms as long as Mr. Tickle's. Mr. Tickle munched his biscuit. He looked out of the window. Today looks very much like a tickling day, he thought to himself. So, later that morning, after Mr. Tickle had made his bed and cooked his breakfast, he set off through the wood. As he walked along, he kept his eyes very wide open, looking for somebody to tickle, looking for anybody to tickle. Eventually, Mr. Tickle came to school. There was nobody about, so, reaching up his extraordinary long arms to a high window ledge, Mr. Tickle pulled himself up and peeped in through the open window. Inside, he could see a classroom. There were children sitting at their desks, and a teacher writing on the blackboard. Mr. Tickle waited a minute and then reached in through the window. Mr. Tickle's extraordinary long arm went right up to the teacher, paused, and then tickled. The teacher jumped in the air and turned round very quickly to see who was there, but there was nobody there. Mr. Tickle grinned a mischievous grin. He waited another minute and then tickled the teacher again. This time he kept on tickling, until soon the teacher was laughing out loud and saying, "Stop it," over and over again. All the children were laughing too at such a funny sight. There was a terrible pandemonium. Eventually, Mr. Tickle thought that he had had enough fun, so he gave the teacher one more tickle for luck, and then very quietly brought his arm back through the open window. Chuckling to himself, he jumped down from the window, leaving the poor teacher to explain what was all about, which of course he couldn't. Then Mr. Tickle went to town. And what a day Mr. Tickle had. He tickled the policeman on traffic duty at the crossroads in the middle of town. It caused an enormous traffic jam. He ticked the greengrocer just as he was piling apples neatly in his shop window. The greengrocer fell over backwards, and the apples rolled all over the shop. At the railway station, the guard was about to wave his flag for the train to leave. As he lifted his arm in the air, Mr. Tickle tickled him, and every time he tried to wave his flag, Mr. Tickle tickled him until the train was 10 minutes late leaving the station, and all the passengers were furious. That day Mr. Tickle tickled everybody. He tickled the doctor. He tickled the butcher. He even tickled old Mr. Stamp, the postman, who dropped all his letters into a puddle. Then Mr. Tickle went home. Sitting in his armchair in his small house at the other side of the wood, he laughed and laughed every time he thought about all the people he had tickled. So, if you are in any way ticklish, beware of Mr. Tickle and those extraordinary long arms of his. Just think, perhaps he's somewhere about at this very moment while you're reading this book. Perhaps that extraordinary long arm of his is already creeping up to the door of this room. Perhaps it's opening the door now and coming into the room. Perhaps, before you know what is happening, you will be well and truly tickled.
Mr. Greedy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Greedy liked to eat. In fact, Mr. Greedy loved to eat, and the more he ate, the fatter he became. And the trouble was, the fatter he became, the more hungry he became. And the more hungry he became, the more he ate. And the more he ate, the fatter he became. And so it went on. Mr. Greedy lived in a house that looked rather like himself. It was a roly-poly sort of a house. One morning, Mr. Greedy awoke rather earlier than usual. He'd been dreaming about food as usual, and that had made him wake up feeling hungry as usual. So Mr. Greedy got up, went downstairs, and ate the most enormous breakfast. This is what Mr. Greedy had for his breakfast. Toast 2 slices, corn flakes 1 packet, milk 1 bottle, sugar 1 bowlful, toast 3 slices, eggs 3 boiled, toast 4 slices, butter 1 dish, marmalade 1 pot. When he had finished his enormous breakfast, Mr. Greedy sat back in his chair, smiled a very satisfied smile, and thought, that was a delicious breakfast. He thought to himself, now I wonder what would be nice to have for lunch? He decided in order to work up an appetite for lunch, he would go for a long walk. That morning, Mr. Greedy walked and walked and walked. Then he discovered a cave. That's funny, he thought. I don't remember seeing that there before. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of a fellow, decided to explore. He entered the dark cave. Inside, he discovered some giant steps leading upwards. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of a fellow, decided to climb them. They were very steep and very difficult to climb. But with much huffing and puffing, Mr. Greedy climbed up and up. At the top of the steps, Mr. Greedy came to a door. It was, without doubt, the biggest door that Mr. Greedy had ever seen. And it wasn't quite shut. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of a fellow, decided to see what was on the other side of that door. So Mr. Greedy squeezed himself through the crack in the door. And there before him was an amazing sight. The biggest room in the world. The floor was as big as a field. The table in the middle of the floor was as big as a house, and the chairs around it were as high as trees. Mr. Greedy felt very small. Then he sniffed. Coming from somewhere, up on top of that gigantic table was the most delicious foody smell that Mr. Greedy had ever smelled. Mr. Greedy sniffed again, and then decided that he must get up onto that table. So he began to climb up the leg of the enormous chair. It was very difficult, and it took him a long time. But eventually, Mr. Greedy stood on the table. Everything was larger than life. The salt and pepper pots were both as big as pillar boxes. There was a bowl of fruit on the table, and Mr. Greedy tried to lift one of the oranges. And Mr. Greedy, being Mr. Greedy, took a bite out of one of the apples there. Then he looked around. Over on the other side of the table stood the source of that delicious smell. A huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. And on the plate, huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal sausages the size of pillows. And huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal potatoes the size of beach balls. And huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal peas the size of cabbages. Mr. Greedy hurried across the table towards the plate, and, being Mr. Greedy, began to eat. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the plate, and Mr. Greedy found himself being picked up by a giant hand and looking into the eyes of a real live giant. "And who?" thundered the giant. "Are you?" Mr. Greedy was so frightened that he could only just manage to squeak his name. "Mr. Greedy," he squeaked. The giant laughed a laugh as loud as thunder. "Greedy by name and greedy by nature," he bellowed. "Well, I think, Mr. Greedy, that you need to be taught a lesson." And what a lesson it was. The giant made Mr. Greedy eat up everything on that huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. When he had finished, Mr. Greedy felt very ill indeed, as if he would burst at any minute. "Now," said the giant in a much quieter voice, "do you promise never to be greedy again?" "Oh, yes," moaned Mr. Greedy. "I promise." "Very well," said the giant. "Then I'll let you go." Mr. Greedy climbed down from the table and went out through the door, feeling very fat and extremely miserable. And do you know, from that day to this, Mr. Greedy has kept his promise. And do you know something else as well? Mr. Greedy doesn't look like he used to look anymore. He now looks like this, which I think suits him a lot better, don't you? So if you know anybody who's as greedy as Mr. Greedy used to be, you know what to tell them, don't you? Beware of giants. Mr. Happy by Roger Hargreaves. On the other side of the world, where the sun shines hotter than here, and where the trees are 100 feet tall, there is a country called Happyland. As you might very well expect, everybody who lives in Happyland is as happy as the day is long. Wherever you go, you see smiling faces all round. It's such a happy place that even the flowers seem to smile in Happyland. And, as well as all the people being happy, all the animals in Happyland are happy as well. If you've never seen a mouse smile, or a cat, or a dog, or even a worm. Go to Happyland. This is a story about someone who lived there who happened to be called Mr. Happy. Mr. Happy was fat and round and happy. He lived in a small cottage beside a lake at the foot of a mountain and close to a wood in Happyland. One day, while Mr. Happy was out walking through the tall trees in those woods near his home, he came across something which was really rather extraordinary. There, in the trunk of one of the very tall trees was a door. Not a very large door, but nevertheless a door. Certainly a door. A small, narrow, yellow door. Definitely a door. I wonder who lives here, thought Mr. Happy to himself, and he turned the handle of that small, narrow yellow door. The door wasn't locked and it swung open quite easily. Just inside the small, narrow, yellow door was a small, narrow, winding staircase. Leading downwards, Mr. Happy squeezed his rather large body through the rather thin doorway and began to walk down the stairs. The stairs went round and round and down and down and round and down and down and round. Eventually, after a long time, Mr. Happy reached the bottom of the staircase. He looked around and saw, there in front of him, another small narrow door. But this one was red. Mr. Happy knocked at the door. "Who's there?" said a voice. A sad, squeaky sort of voice. "Who's there?" Mr. Happy pushed open the red door slowly, and there, sitting on a stool, was somebody who looked exactly like Mr. Happy, except that he didn't look happy at all. In fact, he looked downright miserable. "Hello," said Mr. Happy. "I'm Mr. Happy." "Oh, are you indeed?" sniffed the person who looked like Mr. Happy but wasn't. "Well, my name is Mr. Miserable, and I'm the most miserable person in the world." "Why are you so miserable?" asked Mr. Happy. "Because I am," replied Mr. Miserable. "How would you like to be happy like me?" asked Mr. Happy. "I'd give anything to be happy," said Mr. Miserable. "But I'm so miserable I don't think I could ever be happy," he added miserably. Mr. Happy made up his mind quickly. "Follow me," he said. "Where to?" asked Mr. Miserable. "Don't argue," said Mr. Happy, and he went out through the small, narrow red door. Mr. Miserable hesitated and then followed. Up and up the winding staircase they went. Up and round and round and up and round and up until they came out into the wood. "Follow me," said Mr. Happy again, and they both set off through the wood back to Mr. Happy's cottage. Mr. Miserable stayed in Mr. Happy's cottage for quite some time, and during that time, the most remarkable thing happened. Because he was living in Happyland, Mr. Miserable ever so slowly stopped being miserable and started to be happy. His mouth stopped turning down at the corners, and ever so slowly it started turning up at the corners. And eventually, Mr. Miserable did something that he'd never done in the whole of his life. He smiled, and then he chuckled, which turned into a giggle, which became a laugh. A big, booming, hearty, huge, giant, large, enormous laugh. And Mr. Happy was so surprised that he started to laugh as well. And both of them laughed and laughed. They laughed until their sides hurt and their eyes watered. Mr. Miserable and Mr. Happy laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. They went outside and still they laughed. And because they were laughing so much, everybody who saw them started laughing as well. Even the birds in the trees started to laugh at the thought of somebody called Mr. Miserable who just couldn't stop laughing. And that's really the end of the story. Except to say that if you ever feel as miserable as Mr. Miserable used to, you know exactly what to do, don't you? Just turn your mouth up at the corners. Go on. Mr. Nosy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Nosy liked to know about everything that was going on. He was always poking his nose into other people's business. Mr. Nosy was the sort of a person who, if they came upon a locked door, couldn't resist looking through the keyhole to see why the door had been locked. Mr. Nosy was the sort of a person who, if he found an unopened letter addressed to somebody else, would simply have to open it to find out what was inside. Mr. Nosy was the sort of a person who, if he was sitting reading his paper on a train, would much rather read the paper of the person sitting next to him. Naturally, as you might well imagine, Mr. Nosy was not very popular. People did not like the way in which Mr. Nosy would peek and pry into their affairs. They did not like it at all. But did that stop Mr. Nosy peeking and prying? It did not. Mr. Nosy lived in a funny, tall, thin house in a place called Tiddletown. The people of Tiddletown decided that Mr. Nosy was becoming much too nosy, and so they held a meeting to discuss what to do about him. "We must find some way of stopping him being so nosy," said old Mr. Chips, the town carpenter. "That's right," said Mrs. Washer, who ran the Tiddletown laundry. "He needs to be taught a lesson. If only we could think of a way to stop him poking his nose into everything," said Mr. Brush, the painter. And then a small smile spread over his face. "Listen," he said, now grinning. "I have a plan." All his friends gathered round to listen to his plan. The following morning, Mr. Nosy was out walking along Tiddletown High Street when he heard somebody whistling behind one of the closed doors. "I wonder what's going on here," he thought to himself, and tiptoeing up to the door, he quietly opened it and peeped in. Splash went a very wet paintbrush right on the end of Mr. Nosy's nose, covering it with bright red paint. "Oh dear, I am sorry," said Mr. Brush, who was painting the inside of the door. Poor Mr. Nosy had to go straight home to try and remove the red paint, which was very difficult and rather painful. Mr. Brush chuckled to himself. The plan had begun. The following day, Mr. Nosy was walking past the laundry when he heard somebody laughing on the other side of the wall. "I wonder what's going on here," he thought to himself. And standing on tiptoe, he looked over the wall. Snap went a clothes peg right on the end of Mr. Nosy's nose. "Oh dear, I am sorry," said Mrs. Washer, who was hanging up clothes on a washing line on the other side of the wall. Poor Mr. Nosy removed the clothes peg and went off down the street, feeling extremely sorry for himself and for his poor red nose. Mrs. Washer chuckled to herself. The plan was working. The next day, Mr. Nosy was going past a fence when he heard hammering. "I wonder what's going on here," he thought to himself, and creeping very quietly to the end of the fence, he peeped round. Bang went a hammer right on the end of Mr. Nosy's nose. "Oh dear, I am sorry," said old Mr. Chips, who was nailing up a loose plank in the fence. Poor Mr. Nosy had to go home immediately and bandage his poor red sore nose. Mr. Chips grinned a broad grin. The plan was working very well indeed. The following day, Mr. Nosy was walking in the woods when he heard somebody sawing wood. "I wonder what's going on here," he thought to himself, and he crept up behind a tree. He was just about to peer out from behind the tree when it suddenly occurred to him that if he did, something very nasty might happen to his nose. And so he went on his way without being nosy. Behind the tree, with a saw raised in his hand, stood Mr. Herd the farmer. When he saw that Mr. Nosy had gone on his way without being nosy, he laughed and laughed and laughed. The plan had worked. Mr. Herd hurried into Tiddletown to tell everybody. The plan really had worked, because after that, Mr. Nosy stopped being nosy and soon became very good friends with everybody in Tiddletown. And that is the end of the story. Except to say that if you are ever tempted to be as nosy as Mr. Nosy used to be, you'd better expect one thing: a sore nose. Mr. Sneeze by Roger Hargreaves. This is Coldland, which is a country somewhere near the North Pole. The weather in Coldland is winter all the time. When it isn't snowing, it's freezing. And when it isn't freezing, it's snowing. So you can imagine how cold it is. Because it's so cold in Coldland, everybody who lives there is cold as well. You can tell if somebody comes from Coldland because everybody there has a red nose. And people in Coldland aren't the only ones with red noses. In Coldland, you can see red-nosed dogs chasing red-nosed cats chasing red-nosed mice. In Coldland, you can even see red-nosed elephants. And what you hear most of the time in Coldland is a noise that sounds like this. The sound of the sneeze is very common indeed in Coldland, which is not very surprising, is it? This is the story of Mr. Sneeze, who lived in a small snow-covered cottage in Shivertown, the capital of Coldland. Every morning, Mr. Sneeze woke up, sneezed, got up, sneezed, got dressed, sneezed, went downstairs, sneezed, ate his breakfast, sneezed, and went to work. Still sneezing. "I don't like this sneezing all the time," he thought to himself every day, until one day he decided to leave Coldland and try to find a cure for the sneezes. So that very same day, Mr. Sneeze packed the things he'd need for his journey, mainly handkerchiefs, sneezed, locked his front door, sneezed, and set off. He walked and sneezed and walked his way across Coldland. And then he sneezed and walked and sneezed for days and days until Coldland was far behind. As he walked away from cold land, he noticed that there was less and less snow. And eventually he walked so far that there was no snow at all. And as he walked, he noticed something else. He wasn't walking and sneezing. He was walking and walking. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sneezing. Not at all. Not a bit. Not even the tiniest tissue. I wonder why I'm not sneezing, he thought to himself. But he must have thought his thought out loud to himself, because a voice behind him replied, "You're not sneezing because you haven't got a cold." Mr. Sneeze jumped, turned, and there behind him stood a wise old wizard. "What's a cold?" asked Mr. Sneeze. "A cold is what you catch when you're too cold," said the wise old wizard wisely. "Oh," said Mr. Sneeze, "but I come from a country called Coldland where everybody is too cold all the time." "Nonsense," snorted the wizard. "It can't be too cold all the time because of the sun." And he pointed to the sun, which was smiling in the sky. "But we don't have any sun in Coldland," said Mr. Sneeze. "No sun!" exclaimed the wizard. "How extremely extraordinarily extraordinary. We'd better do something about that then, hadn't we?" "Yes," agreed Mr. Sneeze, not quite knowing what the wizard was talking about. "How far away is this place called Coldland?" asked the wizard. "Oh, it's miles and miles and miles away," replied Mr. Sneeze. "In which direction?" asked the wizard. Mr. Sneeze pointed. "Shouldn't take long," said the wizard, who then waved his wand and muttered some magic words, which wouldn't be magic if we told you what they were. Whatever those magic words were, they worked. Before you could say sneeze, both the wizard and Mr. Sneeze were transported to Shivertown, which you will remember is the capital of Coldland. As usual, it was snowing. "I say, this is a cold, gloomy place," said the wizard. "Atishu," replied Mr. Sneeze, who had started sneezing again. "Coldland certainly needs some sunshine," said the wizard, "and that's going to take some rather special magic." "Please hurry up," said Mr. Sneeze, who was rapidly turning into a snowman. "Now," said the wizard, ignoring him, "I'm going to say some magic words, and I want you to sneeze 3 times immediately afterwards." The wise old wizard then held up his magic wand and muttered some more magic words, which again wouldn't be magic if we told you what they were. "Atishu, Atishu, Atishu," sneezed Mr. Sneeze. Then quite suddenly, as if by magic, which indeed it was, the sun came out from behind the big black clouds, and it stopped snowing. "There now," said the wizard. "That should stop the sneezing." And then, after muttering some more magic words, and without waiting to even say goodbye, he disappeared. Mr. Sneeze just stood there in the sunshine, watching the snow begin to melt. After that, the sun shone every day. And today, Coldland isn't anything like it used to be. You can't see red-nosed dogs chasing red-nosed, cats chasing red-nosed mice anymore. And these days, the sound of the sneeze is a very uncommon sound indeed. And even Mr. Sneeze doesn't sneeze anymore. And that isn't the only thing different about Mr. Sneeze, as he discovered himself when he looked in the mirror one morning. Can you see what was different about Mr. Sneeze? It happened one other time too. See if you can find the page where that was.
Mr. Bump by Roger Hargreaves. This is the sad story of Mr. Bump. The trouble was that Mr. Bump just could not help having little accidents. If there was something for Mr. Bump to bump into, he'd bump into it all right. For instance, if you were to see Mr. Bump out walking down a street in your town, and if there happened to be something to bump into down that street, then you know what would happen, don't you? Bump! Mr. Bump was just the same at home. He lived in an extremely nice home, but even there he couldn't help having those little accidents. For instance, one morning when Mr. Bump went outside his house, he noticed that the chimney pot had come loose in a storm the night before. "I must fix that before it falls off," thought Mr. Bump to himself, and he hurried to his garden shed to fetch a ladder. It was a very long ladder. Mr. Bump walked up the garden path with the ladder on his shoulder. He turned the corner of the garden path. Crash went the living room window. "Oh dear," thought Mr. Bump, and he turned to see what had happened. Crash went the kitchen window behind him. "Oh dear," thought Mr. Bump again, and he rested the ladder against the wall of the house so that he could climb up on to the roof to mend the chimney pot. Crash went the bedroom window. So you can see how Mr. Bump had his little accidents. Mr. Bump had had many jobs, but somehow they never seemed to last very long. As soon as anything got lost or broken, or splintered or chipped or snapped or cracked or torn or burst or wrenched or crunched or split or slit, Mr. Bump got the blame. For instance, when Mr. Bump worked on a farm, he tripped over the farm dog and spilt the milk, which he was carrying for the farmer's wife, and which the farm cat lapped up. For instance, when Mr. Bump was a postman, he got his hand stuck in a pillar box, and they had to fetch the fire brigade to come and set him free. For instance, when Mr. Bump was a bus conductor, he fell off the bus and couldn't catch it up again, and all the passengers travelled without having to pay. For instance, when Mr. Bump was a carpenter, he found that when he was hammering nails, he hammered his thumb most of the time, and the nail hardly at all. In order to recover from this series of rather unfortunate happenings, Mr. Bump decided to take a holiday. There he could think about what sort of job he could do where he wouldn't be such a nuisance to everybody. So off he set to the station to catch a train to the seaside. While Mr. Bump was on holiday, several things happened. For instance, he fell off a boat into the sea, and the lifeboat had to come and rescue him. For instance, one day when he was quietly walking along the beach, minding his own business, he got his foot stuck in a bucket, and as he couldn't get it off, he had to walk round with it on his foot for hours. For instance, another time he was walking along the beach. He walked straight into a large hole that somebody had dug, and he had to stay there all night because he couldn't climb out on his own. However, despite all these little accidents, Mr. Bump enjoyed his holiday, and while he was there, he had a splendid idea about what sort of job he should do. It was quite the best idea Mr. Bump had ever had. An absolutely splendid idea. And now Mr. Bump works happily for Mr. Barley the farmer. Mr. Barley has a rather large apple orchard on his farm, and that's where Mr. Bump works. Mr. Bump's job is picking apples, but he doesn't use a ladder to climb up the tree to pick the apples like other apple pickers. Oh no, Mr. Bump has a much better way of picking apples than that. He just walks about, and before long Mr. Bump, being Mr. Bump, walks into a tree. Bump! And down falls an apple, and Mr. Bump catches it. This makes the job of apple picking much easier, and Mr. Bump is very pleased about his new job. And Mr. Barley is very pleased about his new apple picker. So you see, the story of Mr. Bump isn't such a sad story after all. And if you ever bump yourself, you know what to do, don't you? Go and eat an apple picked by Mr. Bump, and then you won't feel your bump at all. You'll remember that the next time you have a bump, won't you? Good. Mr. Snow by Roger Hargreaves. One night, 2 days before Christmas, it started to snow. All night it snowed and snowed and snowed and snowed and snowed. Millions and billions and trillions of big, white, soft snowflakes covered the whole wide world. When morning came, it was quite amazing to see just how much snow had fallen. All the houses, all the trees, all the roads, and all the fields were covered. It was almost as if a huge, white blanket had been gently laid over everything. Everywhere you looked was white. And then the sun came out, and so did the children. They were all dressed up and muffled up, wearing scarves and woolies, and gloves and boots so that they wouldn't catch cold. All the children were so excited to see so much snow, which isn't surprising, really, because there was more snow than they'd ever seen before. Some of them went on their sledges, racing down the hills. Some of them, who didn't have sledges, threw snowballs at each other. One little boy even made a snowball that was as big as himself. And some of the children made snowmen. Then it was Christmas Eve. The children all went home early so that they could go to bed early so that they could get up early to see what Father Christmas had brought them. But that particular Christmas Eve, Father Christmas was in trouble. And the trouble was that it had snowed so much that Father Christmas was stuck. Well and truly stuck. There was so much snow that his reindeer simply couldn't pull his sleigh piled high with all the presents that he had to deliver to all the children. Oh dear, thought Father Christmas to himself. Oh dear me, what am I to do? He sat down on his sack of toys and thought how he could manage to deliver all the presents to all the children before they woke up on Christmas morning. Oh dear me, he said out loud and sighed. Now it just so happened that Father Christmas had got himself stuck just beside a snowman which one of the children had built, and that gave him an idea. A good idea. A very good idea. A very good idea indeed. How would you like to help me? He asked the snowman, but of course the snowman didn't answer because snowmen can't talk, can they? Of course, I'll have to use some of my magic to bring him to life, thought Father Christmas to himself. So he tugged his white beard 3 times and muttered some Father Christmassy magic words into it. Suddenly, you might almost say magically, the snowman did come to life. "Hello, Father Christmas," said Mr. Snow, which was the snowman's name. "You look a bit sort of stuck if you ask me." "Which you aren't, but I'll say so anyway. And if you ask me again, I'd say you need a sort of helping hand. If you know what I mean, which you probably do, because that's probably why you've brought me to life. Which you certainly did, so can I be of any assistance?" Mr. Snow, as you might have gathered, was a rather talkative sort of snowman. "Exactly," beamed Father Christmas. "Let's get started." And start they did. Mr. Snow gave Father Christmas an enormous push, and off they went. They divided the work between them. It was Mr. Snow's job to make sure that all the right toys for all the right boys, and all the right toys for all the right girls, were put into all the right sacks. It was Father Christmas's job to make sure he took all the right sacks down all the right chimneys and delivered all the right toys to all the right boys and all the right toys to all the right girls. Mr. Snow and Father Christmas made sure that Susan got her teddy bear. Mr. Snow and Father Christmas made sure that Peter got his train. Mr. Snow and Father Christmas made sure that John got his piggy bank. Mr. Snow and Father Christmas even made sure that little Jane got her squeaky pink elephant to play with in the bath. And then all of a sudden they discovered that, between them, they'd finished. "I'd like to thank you very much indeed for helping me deliver all the right toys to all the right boys," said Father Christmas, shaking Mr. Snow by the hand. "Not forgetting all the right toys to all the right girls," replied Mr. Snow, shaking Father Christmas by the hand. "And now I'd better turn you back into a snowman again," said Father Christmas. "Thank you again and goodbye." "My pleasure," smiled Mr. Snow. "And do you know, from that Christmas to this Christmas, Father Christmas always chooses a snowman to help him. So the next time you build a snowman, you'd better make sure you build him properly, because somebody you know might want that snowman to give him a hand. And you know who that would be, don't you?" Mr. Messy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Messy was the messiest person you've ever met in your whole life. He looked messy because he was messy in everything he did. You could always tell where Mr. Messy had been because he left a trail of messy fingerprints wherever he'd been. Oh yes, Mr. Messy was messy by name, messy by nature. Mr. Messy lived in a particularly messy-looking house. The paint was peeling. The windows were broken. There were tiles missing from the roof. The flower beds were overgrown with weeds. The garden gate was off its hinges. And had Mr. Messy cut the grass in his garden lately? He had not. One morning, Mr. Messy woke up in his messy bed, yawned, scratched, got up, cleaned his teeth, leaving the top off the toothpaste, had his breakfast, spilling cornflakes all over the floor, and then set out for a walk, tripping over a brush he'd left lying in the garden 2 weeks before. There was a wood behind Mr. Messy's messy house with the messy garden, and that's where he went for his walk. It was a particularly large wood with lots and lots of trees, and it took Mr. Messy a long time to walk through it. But he didn't really mind because he felt like walking that morning, so he walked and walked right through the wood until he came to the other side. And do you know what he found on the other side of the wood? Mr. Messy found the neatest, prettiest-looking little cottage that he had ever seen. It had a lovely little garden with a stream running through the middle of it. There was a man in the garden clipping the hedge. He looked up as Mr. Messy approached. "Good morning." "I'm Mr. Messy," said Mr. Messy. "I can see that," replied the man, looking him up and down. "I'm Mr. Tidy, and I'm Mr. Neat," said another man, appearing out of the house. "Tidy and neat," said Mr. Tidy. "Neat and tidy," said Mr. Neat. "We're in business together," explained Mr. Tidy. "And the people who own this house have asked us to do some work for them." "What sort of work?" asked Mr. Messy. "Oh, we make things nice and neat," said Mr. Neat. "Tidy things up," added Mr. Tidy. "Perhaps we could come along and do some work for you?" said Mr. Neat, looking at Mr. Messy, who was looking even messier than usual that particular morning. "But I don't want things neat and tidy," said Mr. Messy, looking downright miserable at the thought of it. "Nonsense," said Mr. Tidy. "Fiddlesticks," said Mr. Neat. "But," said Mr. Messy. "Come along," said Mr. Neat. "Off we go," said Mr. Tidy. But, said Mr. Messy. "But nothing," said Mr. Neat, and bundling him into their van, which was parked behind the house, off they went to Mr. Messy's house at the other side of the wood. "Good heavens," said Mr. Neat when he saw where Mr. Messy lived. "Good gracious," added Mr. Tidy. "This is the messiest house I have ever seen in all my born days." They both said together at the same time, Better do something about it, said Mr. Neat. And before Mr. Messy could open his mouth, the two of them were rushing here and there about Mr. Messy's house. Mr. Neat hoot and mowed and pruned and snipped and clipped and cleared and dug and made the garden look neater than it had ever looked before. Mr. Tidy cleaned and primed and rubbed and painted and mended and made the outside of Mr. Messy's house look tidier than it had ever looked before. Then they both went inside the house. Good heavens, said Mr. Neat for the second time that morning. Good gracious, said Mr. Tidy for the second time that morning. And then they set about cleaning the house from top to bottom. They brushed and swept and polished and scrubbed and made the inside of the house look neater and tidier than it had ever looked before. There we are, said Mr. Tidy. All finished, said Mr. Neat. Tidy and neat, said Mr. Tidy. Neat and tidy, said Mr. Neat. Mr. Messy just didn't know what to say. Then they both looked at Mr. Messy. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Mr. Neat said to Mr. Tidy. Precisely, replied Mr. Tidy. What we're both thinking, they said together to Mr. Messy, is that you look much too messy to live in a neat and tidy house like this. But, said Mr. Messy. But whatever Mr. Messy said was no use, and Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy whisked him off to the bathroom upstairs. It had been the messiest room in the house, but now, of course, it was neat as a new pin. Then Mr. Neat got hold of one of Mr. Messy's arms, and Mr. Tidy got hold of the other arm, and they picked him up and put him straight into the bath. Mr. Messy wasn't used to having baths. Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy washed and brushed and cleaned and scrubbed and combed Mr. Messy until he didn't look like Mr. Messy at all. In fact, he looked the opposite of messy. He looked at himself in the mirror. You know what I'm going to have to do now, he said in a rather fierce voice. Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy looked worried. What are you going to have to do? They asked Mr. Messy. I'm going to have to change my name, said Mr. Messy. And then he chuckled. And Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy chuckled. And then Mr. Messy laughed. And Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy laughed. And then they all laughed together and became the best of friends. And that really is the end of the story, except to say that if you're a messy sort of person, you might have a visit from two people, and you know what they are called, don't you? The end. Mr. Topsy-Turvy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Topsy-Turvy was a funny sort of a fellow. Everything about him was either upside down, or inside out, or back to front topsy-turvy, in fact. It was all very extraordinary. To give you some idea of how topsy-turvy Mr. Topsy-Turvy was, you ought to see his house. The front door is upside down to start with, and the curtains hang upside down at the windows. And just look at that chimney pot. All very extraordinary. Inside is the same. Just look at the clock standing on Mr. Topsy-Turvy's mantelpiece. Isn't that the topsiest, turviest clock you've ever seen? And just look at the way Mr. Topsy-Turvy reads a book. Not only does he read it upside down, but he starts to read it at the back page. And just look where Mr. Topsy-Turvy puts the stamp when he sends a letter to somebody. Have you ever seen anything like it? Now, this story is all about the time Mr. Topsy-Turvy came to the town where you and I live. Nobody is quite sure how Mr. Topsy-Turvy got there, or where he came from, but he did arrive, because somebody saw him getting off the train. The trouble was, he did it in a topsy-turvy way, and got out the wrong side and fell onto the railway line, which really isn't all that surprising, is it? When he'd picked himself up and managed to find his way out of the station, Mr. Topsy-Turvy went to a hotel to find a room to spend the night. The hotel manager tried not to smile when he saw Mr. Topsy-Turvy walk into his hotel carrying his suitcase upside down and with his topsy-turvy hat on his head. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. "Can I help you?" Now, something you didn't know about Mr. Topsy-Turvy is the way he speaks. You see, he sometimes gets things the wrong way round. "Afternoon good," said Mr. Topsy-Turvy to the hotel manager. "I'd room alike." The manager scratched his head. "You mean you'd like a room?" he asked. "Please, yes," replied Mr. Topsy-Turvy. Eventually, the hotel manager managed to work out what Mr. Topsy-Turvy was talking about, and he was taken up in the lift to a bedroom. Then Mr. Topsy-Turvy unpacked his suitcase, put on his pajamas, and went to bed. He was rather tired after travelling from wherever he'd come from. The following day, Mr. Topsy-Turvy went round the town, but what a fuss his going round the town caused. He took a taxi from the hotel, but so confused the taxi driver trying to tell him where he wanted to go, the poor man drove straight into a traffic light. "Oh dear," said Mr. Topsy-Turvy, "I am sorry very." Then he went into a big department store in the middle of the town. He walked up to one of the counters. "I'd like a sock of pears," he said to the lady behind the counter. "You mean a pair of socks?" She smiled and showed him a pair of bright red socks. Mr. Topsy-Turvy put them on his hands. Then he tried to leave. But being Mr. Topsy-Turvy, he tried to walk down the up escalator, and all the people who were going up the up escalator all fell over themselves. It was a terrible topsy-turvy jumble. That day, Mr. Topsy-Turvy did all sorts of topsy-turvy things. He walked backwards across a street crossing and caused an enormous traffic jam. He went to a library and put all the books upside down on the shelves and made everybody extremely cross. Then he went to an art gallery and insisted on hanging all the pictures upside down so that he could look at them properly. And then, after Mr. Topsy-Turvy had been in the town for just one day, he disappeared. Nobody knew how he went or where he went, but he certainly went because he wasn't there anymore. The whole town breathed a sigh of relief. But what the town discovered, even though Mr. Topsy-Turvy had left, was that everything was still topsy-turvy. "Read all it about," shouted the newspaper sellers. Instead of shouting, "Read all about it." "News is the here," said the television newsreader, instead of saying, "Here is the news." "Morning good," people started saying to each other when they met, and do you how, instead of how do you do. Everybody was talking topsy-turvy. Can you think of something to say that's topsy-turvy? Go on, try. The end. Mr. Silly by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Silly lives in Nonsenseland, which is a very funny place to live. You see, in Nonsenseland, everything is as silly as can be. In Nonsenseland, the trees are red, and the grass is blue. Isn't that silly? In Nonsenseland, dogs wear hats. And do you know how birds fly in Nonsenseland? No, they don't fly forwards. They fly backwards. It really is a very silly place indeed, which of course is why Mr. Silly lives there. Mr. Silly, in fact, lives in quite the silliest-looking house you have ever seen in your whole life. Have you ever seen a sillier-looking house than that? Now, this particular story is all about the Nonsense Cup. You see, in Nonsenseland, each year they hold a competition, and the cup is awarded to whoever has the silliest idea of the year. Mr. Silly had never won the cup, but each night, lying in his bed, he dreamed about winning it. In order to win the Nonsense Cup, Mr. Silly realized that he would have to think up something remarkably silly. He pondered over the problem one morning at breakfast. Incidentally, you may be interested to know what Mr. Silly was having for breakfast. He was having a cup of coffee, which he put a spoonful of marmalade into. After that, he had a cornflake sandwich. And to finish, he had a boiled egg. But being Mr. Silly, he ate the shell as well. Isn't that a silly breakfast? Anyway, this particular breakfast time, Mr. Silly was thinking how to win that cup. He remembered 2 years ago the cup was won by Mr. Ridiculous. He won by wallpapering his house, which sounds very ordinary, but in fact Mr. Ridiculous had wallpapered the outside of his house. And Mr. Silly remembered last year when Mr. Foolish won the cup. Mr. Foolish, who was a friend of Mr. Silly's, had won the cup by inventing a car. It was quite a normal car, apart from one thing. It had square wheels. Isn't that silly? Mr. Silly thought and thought and thought, but it was no good. He even had another cup of coffee with marmalade, but that didn't help either. So he decided to take a walk. Off he went, leaving his front door open so that he wouldn't have burglars when he was out. On his walk, Mr. Silly met a chicken wearing Wellington boots and carrying an umbrella. "Wouldn't it be silly if you didn't wear Wellington boots and carry an umbrella?" he said to the chicken. "Meow," said the chicken, "because animals in Nonsenseland don't make the same noises as they do in your country." On his walk, Mr. Silly met a worm wearing a top hat, monocle, and an old-school tie. "Wouldn't it be silly if you didn't wear a top hat, a monocle, and an old-school tie?" he said to the worm. "Quack, quack," said the worm. Next, Mr. Silly met a pig wearing trousers and a bowler hat. "Wouldn't it be silly if you didn't wear trousers and a bowler hat?" he asked the pig. "Moo," said the pig. Isn't that silly? It was in the middle of Mr. Silly's walk that he had his idea. It was a beautifully silly idea, quite the silliest idea he'd ever had. He hurried into town and bought himself a pot of paint and a paintbrush. The day of the great awarding of the Nonsense Cup arrived. A huge crowd assembled in the city square to see who was going to win the cup. The King of Nonsenseland mounted the specially built platform. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the crowd in the city square, "it is my pleasure today to award the Nonsense Cup to whoever has had the silliest idea of the year. One of the silliest ideas of the year," continued the king, "is by Mr. Muddle the farmer. He has managed to grow, of all things, a square apple. The crowd clapped as the square apple was held up by Mr. Muddle for everybody to see. He felt sure he was going to win. However, said the king, and Mr. Muddle's face fell, we have had an even sillier idea entered by Mrs. Nincompoop. It was a teapot, quite the silliest teapot there'd ever been. The crowd broke into thunderous applause. I therefore have great pleasure, announced the king, in presenting the nonsense cup to. Just then he looked up and stopped in astonishment. Now in the middle of the city square there is a tree. It's always been there. And it was at this tree that the king was looking in astonishment. What, he cried, has happened to that tree? Everybody turned to look. The tree had green leaves, bright green leaves. Not red leaves like all the trees in Nonsense Land, but green. There was an amazed silence. It was me, piped up Mr. Silly. I painted all the leaves green. Last night when you were all asleep. A green tree, exclaimed the king. Who ever heard of a green tree? A green tree, shouted the crowd. How silly, and they started to applaud. Mr. Silly smiled modestly. The king held up his hands. I think, he said, that this is the silliest idea I have ever heard of. And therefore I award the nonsense cup to Mr. Silly. The crowd cheered and cheered. Mr. Silly went pink with pride, and a bird, perched high up in the branches of the silly green tree, looked down. Woof, it said, and flew off backwards. The end. Mr. Uppity by Roger Hargreaves. This is the story of Mr. Uppity and how Mr. Uppity finishes this story not quite so uppity as at the beginning of the story. You see, Mr. Uppity was one of the rudest people in the world, if not the rudest. He was rude to anybody and everybody. So, of course, in Big Town, which was where he lived, he had no friends at all. Not one. Miserable old Uppity, they used to call him, and he certainly looked it. Now, as well as being rude, Mr. Uppity was also rich, very rich. One of the richest people in the world, if not the richest. He had the largest, longest limousine in Big Town. He had the largest, longest garden in Big Town. He had, on top of the hill in the middle of Big Town, the most enormous house. The biggest house in Big Town, and there he lived, all alone. Miserable old Uppity. One day, Mr. Uppity was walking in the gardens of his enormous house, when suddenly he heard a voice. A little voice. Hello, said the voice. Mr. Uppity looked, and there in one of his hundreds of flower beds was a goblin. Aren't you going to say hello to me? Asked the goblin. Go away, said Mr. Uppity rudely. Oh, I know who you must be, said the goblin. You must be Mr. Uppity who's rude to everybody. Sniffed Mr. Uppity rudely. Well, I know somebody who wants to meet you, said the goblin and skipped off the way goblins do. Come on, he called over his shoulder. Mr. Uppity's curiosity got the better of him. He followed. In there, said the goblin, pointing at a small hole in a tree. Don't be silly, snorted Mr. Uppity. Oh, I'm not being silly, said the goblin. Yes, you are, snapped Mr. Uppity. I can't possibly get in there. Aha, smiled the goblin. And then he said a magic word known only to goblins, which sounded like wobbly gobbly gook, or something like that. Suddenly Mr. Uppity started shrinking. He shrank and he shrank until he was exactly the same size as the goblin. Turn me back to my proper size at once, spluttered Mr. Uppity in a rage. Shan't, grinned the goblin. And so saying, the goblin climbed through the hole into the tree. Poor Mr. Uppity didn't know what to do, so he followed him. Inside the tree there was a staircase going down and down. Do you know where it led to? It led directly to the kingdom of the goblins. That's where. I demand to be taken immediately to whoever is in charge, said Mr. Uppity angrily. Oh, you shall, grinned the goblin. And he led Mr. Uppity through the streets of the kingdom of the goblins until they came to a palace. Halt! Who goes there? Cried the goblin sentry at the gate. I have brought Mr. Uppity, said the goblin. Oh, said the sentry and smiled. The goblin and Mr. Uppity passed through the gates and into a courtyard and through some more gates and along a long corridor and through some large gold doors and into a huge room. There, sitting on a gold throne, was the king of the goblins. Your Majesty, announced the goblin, bowing low. May I present Mr. Uppity? Ah, said the king. So you're the fellow who goes about being rude to everybody and doesn't have any friends. Nonsense, said Mr. Uppity rudely. I can see that what I've heard is true, said the king, looking at the indignant Mr. Uppity. You're much too puffed up with your own importance. Therefore, he continued, I am going to allow you to be turned back to your proper size. But when you get back to Big Town, if you're rude to anybody at all, you will immediately shrink to the size you are now. Do you understand? The goblin then took Mr. Uppity back through the kingdom of the goblins, and up the staircase, and out of the tree at the bottom of Mr. Uppity's gardens. The goblin looked at Mr. Uppity and said something which sounded like "Coo-gilba-gilbo," or something, which is probably wobbly-gobbly-gook, said backwards, and Mr. Uppity grew and grew back to his original size. "Now you remember what the king said," warned the goblin. "Don't be so uppity in future." Mr. Uppity marched off furiously up to his enormous house. The following day, Mr. Uppity was out walking through the streets of Big Town. Suddenly, he came across a little boy playing with a ball. "Get out of my way," snapped Mr. Uppity rudely. But as soon as he'd said it, you know what happened, don't you? Yes. Mr. Uppity shrank and shrank until he was no bigger than the ball the boy was playing with. "Oh dear," he gasped, and then he thought. "I'm sorry," he said to the boy. "What I meant to say was, please could I get past?" Immediately, Mr. Uppity grew to his original size, and the boy moved and Mr. Uppity went on his way. Then he met an old lady carrying a large shopping basket. She was late for market. "Excuse me," she said to Mr. Uppity. "Could you tell me the time, please?" "No," said Mr. Uppity rudely. But as soon as he'd said it, you know what happened, don't you? Yes. Mr. Uppity shrank and shrank until he could easily have fitted into the old lady's basket. "Oh dear," he gasped, and then he thought. "I'm sorry," he said to the old lady. "What I meant to say was, it's 25 past 11. Immediately Mr. Uppity grew to his original size, and the old lady thanked him, and Mr. Uppity went on his way. Then he went and bought a newspaper from a man standing on the corner of the main street in Big Town. He was just about to walk away when suddenly he stopped and thought. He turned back to the man and said, "Thank you." Thank you were two words Mr. Uppity had never used before. The man smiled. A smile was something Mr. Uppity wasn't used to getting. Then Mr. Uppity was stopped by a man who asked him if he could tell him the way to the bank. Mr. Uppity was about to say no when he thought. "Yes," he said, and told the man. "Thank you," said the man. "Thank you" were words Mr. Uppity not only had never used before, but were words he had never had said to him before. Mr. Uppity smiled. He felt happy. Happy was a feeling Mr. Uppity wasn't used to feeling. He liked it. And you know, from that day forward to this day backward, Mr. Uppity is a changed person. He's still the richest person in Big Town, perhaps the richest person in the world, but now he has lots of friends, and he smiles a lot, and he never gets that shrinking feeling. And do you know which words Mr. Uppity uses most of all these days? Please and thank you. So, what we'd like to say is, thank you for reading this story. And if you're ever thinking about being rude to somebody, please keep a sharp lookout for goblins. The end. Mr. Small by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Small was very small, probably the smallest person you've ever seen in your whole life, or perhaps the smallest person you've never seen in your whole life, because he was so small you probably wouldn't see him anyway. Mr. Small was about as big as a pin, which isn't very big at all. So perhaps we should say that Mr. Small was as small as a pin. Mr. Small lived in a small house underneath a daisy at the bottom of Mr. Robinson's garden. It was a very nice house, although very tiny, and it suited Mr. Small very well indeed. He liked living there. Now, this story is all about the time Mr. Small decided to get a job. The trouble was, what sort of job could Mr. Small do? After all, there aren't that many small jobs. Mr. Small had thought about it for a long time, but hadn't had any ideas. Not one. He was thinking about it now while he was having lunch. He was having half a pea, 1 crumb, and a drop of lemonade. Mr. Small thought and thought while he was eating his big lunch, but it was no use. Thinking just made him thirsty, so he had another drop of lemonade. "I know," he thought to himself. "After lunch I'll go and see Mr. Robinson and ask his advice." So after lunch he left his house and walked to Mr. Robinson's house at the top of the garden. It was quite a long walk for somebody as small as Mr. Small, and halfway there he stopped for a rest. He sat on a pebble, feeling quite out of breath. A worm crawled by and stopped. "Good afternoon, Mr. Small," said the worm. "Good afternoon, Walter," said Mr. Small to the worm, whom he knew quite well. "Out for a walk, are you?" asked Walter. "Going to see Mr. Robinson," replied Mr. Small. "Oh," said Walter. "About a job," added Mr. Small. "Oh," said Walter the worm again and crawled off. Walter was a worm of very few words. After he'd rested for a while, Mr. Small set off again, and walked all of the rest of the way to Mr. Robinson's house without stopping once. When he got there, he climbed up the steps to Mr. Robinson's back door. He knocked at the door. Nobody heard him. He knocked again at the door. Nobody heard him. The trouble was, you see, that if you're as small as Mr. Small, you don't have a very loud knock. Mr. Small looked up. There, high above his head, was a doorbell. How can I ring the bell when I can't reach it? Thought Mr. Small to himself. He started to climb up the wall brick by brick to reach the bell. He had climbed up 4 bricks when he made the mistake of looking down. Oh dear, he said, and fell. Bang! Ouch! Said Mr. Small, rubbing his head. Just then Mr. Small heard footsteps. It was the postman. The postman came to the door, posted his letters, and was just about to leave when he heard a voice. Hello, said the voice. The postman looked down. Hello, he said to Mr. Small. Who are you? I'm Mr. Small, said Mr. Small. Will you ring the bell for me? Of course I will, replied the postman in answer to Mr. Small's question. And reaching out, he pressed the bell with his finger. Thank you, said Mr. Small. My pleasure, said the postman, and off he went. Mr. Small heard footsteps coming to the door. The door opened. Mr. Robinson opened the door and looked out. That's funny, he said. I'm sure I heard somebody ring the bell. He was about to shut the door when he heard a little voice. Hello, said the voice. Hello, Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson looked down and down. Hello, he said. What are you doing here? I've come to ask your advice, said Mr. Small to Mr. Robinson. Well, said Mr. Robinson, you'd better come in and have a talk. Mr. Small followed Mr. Robinson into the house and perched on the arm of Mr. Robinson's favorite chair. He told him how he couldn't think of a job that he could do. Mr. Robinson sipped a cup of tea and listened. So you see, Mr. Small explained, how difficult it is. Yes, I can see that, said Mr. Robinson. But leave it to me. Mr. Robinson knew a lot of people. Mr. Robinson knew somebody who worked in a restaurant and arranged for Mr. Small to work there, putting mustard into mustard pots. But Mr. Small kept falling into the pots and getting covered in mustard, so he left that job. Mr. Robinson knew somebody who worked in a sweet shop and arranged for Mr. Small to work there, serving sweets. But Mr. Small kept falling into the sweet jars, so he left that job. Mr. Robinson knew somebody who worked in a place where they made matches and arranged for Mr. Small to work there, packing matches into boxes. But Mr. Small kept getting shut in the boxes with the matches, so he left that job. Mr. Robinson knew somebody who worked on a farm and arranged for Mr. Small to work there, sorting out the brown eggs from the white eggs. But Mr. Small kept getting trapped by the eggs, so he left that job. What are we going to do with you? Mr. Robinson asked Mr. Small one evening. Don't know, said Mr. Small in a small voice. I've got one more idea, said Mr. Robinson. I know somebody who writes children's books. Perhaps you could work for him. So the following day, Mr. Robinson took Mr. Small to meet the man who wrote children's books. Can I work for you? Mr. Small asked the man. Yes, you can, replied the man. Pass me that pencil and tell me all about the jobs you've been doing. Then I'll write a book about it. I'll call it Mr. Small, he added. But children won't want to read a book all about me, exclaimed Mr. Small. Yes, they will, replied the man. They'll like it very much. And you did, didn't you? The end. Mr. Daydream by Roger Hargreaves. This is a story about Mr. Daydream. You know what he looks like, don't you? Because you've seen his picture on the front of this book. It's also a story about a little boy called Jack. And you don't know what he looks like, so here's a picture of him. Now Jack was a very good little boy. He always ate up all his lunch. He always went to bed when he was told. He always said please and thank you. But Jack was a daydream. Whenever he was supposed to be thinking about something, he found himself thinking about something else. Daydreaming. One day, Jack was at school. He was sitting at his desk, listening to the teacher talking about history. It was a very warm day and Jack was glad. He was sitting at the back of the classroom next to the open window. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Jack saw something outside the window on the grass in front of the school. Something blue. It was a small, cloud-shaped figure. Jack couldn't believe his eyes. The figure looked at Jack, looking at him, smiled and waved. Jack looked at his teacher, who was still talking. Then he got up quietly, ever so quietly, and slipped out of the open window. He crossed the grass to the strange-looking cloud-shaped figure. Hello, he said. Who are you? I'm Mr. Daydream, said the figure. What's your name? Jack, said Jack. I'm going off on an adventure, said Mr. Daydream to Jack. Would you like to come with me? Oh, yes, please, replied Jack. Very well then, said Mr. Daydream, and, putting 2 fingers in his mouth, he let out the loudest whistle Jack had ever heard in his whole life. A huge bird swooped down out of the sky and landed beside Jack and Mr. Daydream. "Come on," said Mr. Daydream to Jack, and climbed onto the bird's back. Jack climbed on too. It was a really enormous bird, and there was plenty of room for both of them. "Hold on," said Mr. Daydream. Jack held on tight. The huge bird flapped its huge wings, and suddenly they were high up in the air. They flew faster and faster over the countryside. They flew over fields and farms and towns and hills and trees and valleys until they were far, far away from Jack's school. It was very exciting. Mr. Daydream turned to Jack. "How would you like to go to Africa?" he shouted. They were traveling so fast now, Jack just nodded his head and held on even tighter. And they flew across the sea. Suddenly, it seemed in no time at all, there below them was Africa. The bird landed in a jungle clearing, and Jack and Mr. Daydream climbed off the bird's back. It was very hot. "Come on," said Mr. Daydream to Jack. "Let's go and explore." So off they set, pushing their way through the jungle. Suddenly, in the middle of the clearing, they saw an elephant. "Hello, Mr. Daydream," trumpeted the elephant down its trunk. "Would you like a lift?" "Yes, please," replied Mr. Daydream, and the elephant reached out his trunk, picked him up and then put him on his back. Then he reached out his trunk again, picked up Jack and put him on his back. It was very high. The elephant carried them through the jungle until they came to a river. Then he set them down on the ground, said goodbye, and went off back into the jungle. "How are we going to cross the river?" Jack asked Mr. Daydream. "Perhaps I can be of assistance," wheezed a particularly oily voice coming from the river. They looked, and there was a crocodile. "Use my back as a bridge," suggested the crocodile. It was very helpful. They were halfway across the river on the crocodile's back when the crocodile grinned. A rather nasty grin, all teeth and no smile. Then flicking his enormous tail and shooting Jack and Mr. Daydream up into the air, the crocodile opened his horribly large mouth and waited. It was very frightening. "Oh dear," gasped Jack as he looked down at that enormous mouthful of teeth. "Oh dear, oh help." Mr. Daydream, upside down beside him, put 2 fingers in his mouth and let out that very large whistle of his. Suddenly, just as the crocodile's mouth was about to go snap, the big bird swooped down out of the sky. Mr. Daydream and Jack landed right on the bird's back. "Whoa," said Jack. "Bother," said the crocodile. "Well, I promised you an adventure, didn't I?" grinned Mr. Daydream. "You certainly did," said Jack. "And now," said Mr. Daydream, "I think we will go to Australia." And they did. And Jack learned to throw a boomerang so that it always came back to him. "And now," said Mr. Daydream, "I think we will go to the North Pole." And they did. And Mr. Daydream fell right up to his middle in a snowdrift. "And now," said Mr. Daydream, "I think we will go to the Wild West." And they did. And Mr. Daydream found a huge 10-gallon cowboy hat. The trouble was, when he put it on, he couldn't see out. "Jack," he called from underneath the hat. "Jack! Jack!" Suddenly Jack realized that it wasn't Mr. Daydream saying his name. It was his teacher, and Jack wasn't in the Wild West. He was sitting at his school desk. "Jack," said the teacher again, "you've been daydreaming." It was true. He had. But do you know something? Daydreaming is more fun than history. The end.
Mr. Forgetful by Roger Hargreaves. It was one of those beautiful summer mornings that everybody likes to see. In Forget-Me-Not Cottage, the owner was fast asleep. Mr. Forgetful. He was having a dream. Then the sun streaming through the windows woke up Mr. Forgetful. "Oh," he yawned, and stretched his arms, and tried to remember what he had been dreaming about. But of course he couldn't, because Mr. Forgetful can't remember anything. Anything at all. Ever. Mr. Forgetful got out of bed and went to wash his face, but he'd forgotten where the bathroom was in his house. And do you know what he did? He walked into the wardrobe. "Silly me," he giggled to himself. Eventually, of course, Mr. Forgetful found his bathroom and washed his face. He even remembered to clean his teeth. Then he went downstairs to make himself some breakfast. He toasted some bread, but of course he forgot about it and it was burnt. He boiled himself an egg, but of course he forgot about it and it was hard-boiled. Mr. Forgetful has burnt toast and hard-boiled eggs for breakfast every day. It was such a lovely day. Mr. Forgetful decided to walk down to the village to buy a stamp for a letter he'd written 3 weeks ago but had forgotten to post. Off he said. And did he remember to shut the door of Forget-Me-Not Cottage behind him? Of course he didn't. "Good morning, Mr. Forgetful," said Mrs. Parcel in the village post office. "What can I do for you this fine morning? I'd like a I've forgotten, he said. A stamp, suggested Mrs. Parcel, looking at the letter Mr. Forgetful was carrying. Yes, a stamp. That's what it was I was trying to remember not to forget, said Mr. Forgetful. Mrs. Parcel smiled. She was used to Mr. Forgetful. Mr. Forgetful had some more shopping to do, but could he remember what it was he was supposed to remember not to forget to shop for? Of course he couldn't. So, he decided to go home. On his way he met the village policeman going the other way. Morning, Mr. Forgetful, said the policeman. Will you give Farmer Fields a message from me on your way home, please? Farmer Fields had a farm not very far from Forget-Me-Not Cottage. Tell him there's a sheep loose in the lane, said the policeman. Poor Mr. Forgetful. He'd never had a message to remember in his life before. There's a sheep loose in the lane, he said to himself, trying to remember the message as he hurried along. There's a sheep loose in the lane. 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 Mr. Forgetful repeated the message over and over to himself. There's a sheep loose in the lane. Eventually he arrived at the farm and found Farmer Fields. Mr. Fields, he said, there's a goose asleep in the rain. Farmer Fields couldn't believe his ears. There's a goose asleep in the rain, repeated Farmer Fields slowly. But I don't have any geese, and anyway it isn't raining. Are you sure that was the message? Poor Mr. Forgetful. He got it all wrong, and he couldn't remember how to get it all right. He simply couldn't remember it all. So, off he went home. Poor Mr. Forgetful. Mr. Forgetful walked away from Farmer Fields' farm feeling very sorry for himself. I wish I could remember things, he thought. He was so busy feeling sorry for himself that he didn't see that there was a sheep loose in the lane. He bumped into it and fell over. Bother, said Mr. Forgetful. Bah, said the sheep. How silly letting a sheep loose in the lane, thought Mr. Forgetful. And then he remembered the message. He jumped up and ran back along the lane to the farm as fast as he could. Mr. Fields, he called as he ran into the farmyard. Mr. Fields, there's a goose asleep in the rain. He'd forgotten again. Mr. Fields scratched his head. Come with me. Come on, cried Mr. Forgetful, and pulled Farmer Fields back along the lane until they came to the sheep that was loose. There it is, cried Mr. Forgetful, pointing. A goose. And then he stopped. Oh dear, he said. That's not a goose, is it? That's a sheep. And he blushed. I think, smiled Farmer Fields, that you're the goose. And he chuckled. And Mr. Forgetful giggled. And Farmer Fields laughed. And even the sheep started to laugh, it was so funny. Later that day, Mr. Forgetful sat down in his favorite armchair in Forget-Me-Not Cottage to think about what a funny day it had been. But do you know something? He tried and tried. But try as he would, he simply couldn't remember anything that had happened. Oh, Mr. Forgetful. The end. Mr. Jelly, by Roger Hargreaves. Poor Mr. Jelly was frightened of everything and anything. At the slightest little thing he would quiver, and tremble and shake and turn to jelly. So, it's not really surprising to find that Mr. Jelly lives as far away from anybody that he can find, in the middle of a wood, miles and miles from anywhere. This story begins one morning when Mr. Jelly was asleep. It was a beautiful autumn morning. The sun was shining. The leaves on the trees had turned to a glorious red, and the wind stirred gently in the treetops. A single leaf fell gently from the tree right outside Mr. Jelly's house and quietly brushed against his bedroom window as it fell. Mr. Jelly awoke with a start. What's that terrible noise? He cried. Oh heavens, the house is falling down. Oh disaster, it's an earthquake. Oh calamity, it's the end of the world. And he hid under the bedclothes, trembling with fright. After an hour, by which time he realized that his house wasn't falling down, and there wasn't an earthquake, and the world wasn't coming to an end, Mr. Jelly peeped out from under the bedclothes. Phew, he said. Thank goodness for that. And he got up and went downstairs to make his breakfast. Mr. Jelly poured some cornflakes out of a packet onto a plate. Then he poured some milk onto the cornflakes. Then he went to the cupboard to get some sugar. Snap, crackle, pop, went the cornflakes in the milk. Oh goodness gracious, cried Mr. Jelly, diving under the kitchen table. Oh dear, I hear guns. Oh calamity, it's war. But of course it wasn't. And of course Mr. Jelly eventually came out from under the table and ate up all his cornflakes. After breakfast, Mr. Jelly thought that he'd go for a walk. He was walking through the woods, which surround his house, when a worm poked his head out of the ground. Morning, said the worm cheerfully to Mr. Jelly. Mr. Jelly nearly jumped out of his skin. What? He shouted. Who's there? And then he saw the worm. Oh good heavens, it's a snake, oh dear, a man-eating snake, oh calamity, I'm going to be eaten alive. And he jumped up into a tree. What a performance, commented the worm, and went back into his hole. After an hour Mr. Jelly felt brave enough to climb down from the tree and continue his walk. Eventually, he came out of the other side of the wood and into a field. Mr. Jelly glanced nervously around. It was an empty field. Or was it? In the long grass in the middle of the field, unseen by Mr. Jelly, there was a tramp enjoying a sleep in the autumn sunshine. Mr. Jelly picked his way cautiously through the grass. The tramp, fast asleep, snored. What was that? Shrieked Mr. Jelly. It's a lion. I heard it growl. Oh goodness gracious. Oh dear me, a lion. A huge lion with enormous teeth. A huge lion with sharp teeth that's going to bite me in two. A huge ferocious lion with enormous sharp teeth that's going to bite me in two, if not three. And he fainted. All this commotion awakened the tramp, who yawned, stretched, sat up and saw Mr. Jelly lying on the ground beside him. Oh dear, he said, for he was a kindly tramp. Oh dear. And he picked up Mr. Jelly and placed him gently in the palm of his hand. Mr. Jelly came to, and sat up rubbing his eyes. Then he saw the tramp's face looking at him. Oh disaster, he screamed. Oh calamity, it's a giant, an ogre, oh gracious. He's going to have me for breakfast. My, said the tramp gently. You're a nervous little chap, aren't you? What's your name? Mr. Jelly, stammered Mr. Jelly. I used to be nervous like you, said the tramp, but I learned how not to be. Would you like me to tell you the secret? Mr. Jelly quivered and shook and said, Why? Why? Yes. P. Please. It's very simple, continued the tramp. All you have to do is count up to 10, and you'll find that whoever's frightening you isn't quite so frightening after all. Then he set Mr. Jelly gently down on the grass. Remember, he said to Mr. Jelly, count to 10, and off he went. Mr. Jelly thought that it would be a very good idea if he went home immediately. Back across the field he went. Back through the woods he went. He was walking through the woods when he stepped on a little twig. Snap, went the twig. Mr. Jelly jumped twice his own height in terror. What was that? He shrieked. That terrible snapping noise. It's a tree falling down, that's going to crush me to pieces. Oh calamity. It's a crocodile hiding in the bushes snapping its teeth. Oh disaster. It's... And then he stopped. He took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, he said, and saw that what had gone snap was a twig. A silly old twig. Phew, he said. Mr. Jelly had almost reached his house when a leaf drifted gently down from a tree. On top of him. Help, police, murder, he screamed. I'm being kidnapped. Oh calamity. It's ruffians, with guns. They're going to... And then he stopped. He took a deep breath. On it were 3 vinces. And then he saw what had fallen on him was only a leaf. Nothing but a leaf. A stupid red leaf. It works, he said out loud in wonderment. And do you know, it did work. After that moment, Mr. Jelly became a changed man. Well, you can see that by looking at him, can't you? And he never shrieks, or shouts, or screams, or quivers, or shakes, or trembles anymore. And he never hides under the bedclothes anymore. Well, not very often, anyway. The end. Are Noisy, by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Noisy was a very, very noisy person indeed. For example, if Mr. Noisy was reading this story to you, he'd be shouting at the top of his voice. And the top of Mr. Noisy's voice is a very loud place indeed. You can hear it 100 miles away. For example, when most people sneeze, you can hear them in the next room. But it is who. When Mr. Noisy sneezes, you can hear him in the next country. Now, this story starts when Mr. Noisy was asleep in bed, in his bedroom, in his house, which is on top of a hill. He was snoring, and, as you can well imagine, when Mr. Noisy snores, that is a snore worth hearing. It sounds more like a herd of elephants than a snore. Then Mr. Noisy's alarm clock went off. Mr. Noisy's alarm clock sounds like no other alarm clock in the world. It sounds more like a fire engine. Mr. Noisy woke up, and so too did all the people who lived in Wobbletown, which is at the bottom of Mr. Noisy's hill. Later that day, Mr. Noisy decided that he had to go shopping. He went out of his house, shutting the door behind him. Bang! The door wobbled. The house wobbled. The whole hill wobbled. Wobbletown wobbled. Even a bird, flying high above, wobbled. Then Mr. Noisy walked down the hill. Clump, C-L-U-M-P, clump. He walked into the baker's shop. Crash, went the door as he opened it. Bang, went the door as he shut it. I'd like a loaf of bread, boomed Mr. Noisy to Mrs. Crumb, the baker's wife. Mrs. Crumb trembled and sold him a loaf. Then Mr. Noisy walked along the street to the butcher. Clump, C-L-U-M-P, clump. He walked into the butcher's shop. Crash went the door as he opened it. Bang went the door as he shut it. I'd like a piece of meat, boomed Mr. Noisy to Mr. Bacon, the butcher. Mr. Bacon trembled and sold him some meat. Afterwards, Mrs. Crumb met Mr. Bacon in the street. We really must do something about Mr. Noisy being so noisy, she said. Absolutely, replied Mr. Bacon. But what? Oh no, said Mrs. Crumb, and she whispered into Mr. Bacon's ear. Mr. Bacon smiled a small smile, which grew into a broad grin. Mrs. Crumb, he said, I'll think you have the answer. The following day Mr. Noisy went shopping again. Clump, C-L-U-M-P, clump. He went into Mrs. Crumb's shop. I'd like a loaf of bread, he boomed. Sorry, what did you say? Asked Mrs. Crumb, pretending not to hear. I'd like a loaf of bread, Mr. Noisy shouted. Sorry, said Mrs. Crumb. Can you speak up, please? I'd like LOAF of bread, roared Mr. Noisy. Can't hear you, replied Mrs. Crumb. Mr. Noisy gave up and went out. Mr. Noisy went into Mr. Bacon's shop. I'd like a piece of meat, he boomed. Mr. Bacon pretended not to notice. I'd like a piece of meat, Mr. Noisy shouted. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon. I said, I'd like a piece of meat, roared Mr. Noisy. Pardon, said Mr. Bacon. Mr. Noisy gave up and went out and went home and went to bed, hungry. The day after, Mr. Noisy tried again. He went into Mrs. Crumb's shop. I'd like a loaf of bread, he boomed. A what? Asked Mrs. Crumb. Mr. Noisy started shouting at the very top of his voice. A loaf of. And then he stopped. And then he thought. And then he said, quietly, I'd like a loaf of bread, please, Mrs. Crumb. Mrs. Crumb smiled. Certainly, she said. Then Mr. Noisy went into Mr. Bacon's shop. I'd like a piece of meat, he boomed. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon. Yes, I did, shouted Mr. Noisy at the very, very top of his voice. I said, I'd like, and then he stopped. And then he thought. And then he said, quietly, I'd like a piece of meat, please, Mr. Bacon. Mr. Bacon smiled. My pleasure, he said. So, carrying his bread and his meat, Mr. Noisy set off home, up the hill. Clump, C-L-U-M-P, clump. Then he stopped. Then he thought. And then, do you know what he did? He tiptoed. A tiptoe was something Mr. Noisy had never tried before. It was fun. Mr. Noisy arrived at his front door. He put out his hand to open the door. And then he stopped. And then he thought. And then, do you know what he did? He opened the door very quietly. He stepped inside. And then he shut the door very gently. Quietly and gently were two things Mr. Noisy had never tried before either. That was fun too. And do you know something? From then until now, Mr. Noisy isn't anything like as noisy as he used to be. And do you know something else? The people of Wobbletown are delighted, especially Mrs. Crumb and Mr. Bacon. And do you know something else? Mr. Noisy has learned how to whisper. The end.